Hello and welcome to the Soul Wisdom Exchange. I'm Regina Curtis, the creator and founder of At Matri. I'm a soul wisdom mentor and an intuitive an art channel and an intuitive artist. I have a lot of titles. So here on the Soul Wisdom Exchange, we talk about soul wisdom and soul wisdom languages. So I understand soul wisdom to be our authentic ways of knowing and being. And our soul wisdom languages are how that wisdom speaks to and through us. So today I have a special guest here, Melinda Nakagawa from Spark in Nature. From Spark in Nature. Let me say your name of your business correctly. And a good friend of mine, someone who I really enjoy having conversations with, having soul wisdom exchanges with, and it always just is a beautiful adventure. So we're in for a treat today. Welcome, Melinda. How are you today?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. It's just
Absolutely.
such a pleasure to be here with you and having more conversations about soul wisdom and how we use that to guide us in our work and in our life. I'm doing well today.
Good. It's so good to have you here. I know I've been trying to convince you to come have a chat with me for a while, so I'm excited that you're here. So tell us a little bit about who you are and the work that you do.
I am, I really like the title that you gave me, I can't remember what it was. What was it?
Nature Wisdom Connector.
Wisdom Connector. And as I reflect on that, I just really feel that resonates with the work that I do. I have been calling myself a nature connection mentor, and have more recently been teaching nature journaling as a tool and a means of helping people reconnect to the natural world. Start to see things in a different way, start to see the extraordinary in the ordinary around them, and using our senses in different ways of observing and being in nature so that we can create a personal relationship for calming our nervous system, getting some peace and joy, and getting to know the earth.
I love it. I love it so much. Being an observer is something that's really just like ringing so true to me right now about the way that you show up as a mentor, the way that you show up as a collaborator, as a friend. You have this beautiful way of observing, and whether it's observing nature, observing behaviors, patterns, or even just the way you listen, I think is very similar to the way that you observe in nature. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how you experience that internally, if that makes sense. Like, what is your process when you're an observer? What are you doing? How are you doing it? And why are you doing it?
That's a really good question. I hadn't really thought about how I do it for my own life. So when I'm out in nature, I'm really slowing down, and I'll take breaths just to kind of come to the moment, because in my life, I tend to be very busy, kind of in air quotes, because I don't really like to use that word, but that's what we do in our culture, and active and overloaded with activities, overworking, overproducing, all of that. So I have a lot of those tendencies, and I'm conscious of being aware of that and slowing that down. And watching nature has really helped me tap into something that I didn't know was possible. I thought I'm expected to do all of these things quickly and efficiently, and a lot of accomplishments, and that my whole life has not satisfied that thing inside, just of not really having things like not enough, right? Because we are taught to seek outside of ourselves for happiness and satisfaction and joy and value, that we don't recognize that it's already in us, and that looking at nature is a mirror to looking within. So the way the more that I've looked at nature, and actually nature journaling in particular, I have to say, has really honed this practice for me, is I'm much more aware of my thinking and my thoughts these days. Just like
Mhm.
you touched on before, that I have many our guests or people who are listening can resonate with this. I have this chatter that's going on in my head. You can call it a voice in your head or your critic or your whatever it is. And I kind of feel it over here on the right side of my head.
Yeah,
And
I always feel it on the right side of my
yeah,
head too.
right here.
Yeah.
And it's barking orders. And sometimes I see it as the inner slave driver. And sometimes it's the voice of my mother or ancestral,
Mhm.
her mother and her mother had the same kind of critical voice. So I'm more able to recognize when the voices or thoughts or chatter comes from that unhelpful place versus feeling into my soul wisdom, like Regina, like you describe, and I know your listeners know what I'm talking about. And for those of you who aren't familiar, I'm talking about this. For me, it's like a knowing that comes from this kind of my core. You can call it some knowledge from the universe or your higher self or your intuition, but whatever we label it, there is this. It's there, and we can tap into it only when we quiet that chatter,
Mhm.
because I feel like the soul or the intuition, those messages are very subtle. Sometimes they're loud, but oftentimes they're quieter than
Yeah.
the chatter can be.
Well, they start out
And
subtle
yeah,
until they're overpowered by that chatter, and then they get louder because they need to in order to be heard, right?
yeah.
Um, but also, like, that chatter isn't bad, right? It's not a
Mhm,
bad thing. Um, it just isn't the only thing, right? And
mhm,
it's there for a reason. Like you referred to, sometimes it's my mother, the voice of my mother, or the
mhm,
voice of my ancestral patterns, right?
mhm,
Because those patterns are there because of lived experience is
mhm.
how they were born, right? They came from a place of love initially, but as they echo through your life right now, they may not actually be serving in the way that they were designed to. Does that resonate for you?
Yep, absolutely, absolutely.
So it's not necessarily quieting because it's something that isn't that you need to get rid of, right? It's
Mhm,
not like a
yeah,
voice that's bad and trying to
mhm,
harm you, but more so one that it's bringing it into balance, right? So like
mhm,
that voice, if you can help to soften that voice to a level that you can actually hear what's going
mhm,
on, right? And I keep using hear, but
mhm,
for some people, it might be feel. For some
yeah,
people, it might be sense. For some people, maybe even taste, right? Like there
yeah,
might be, there's all these different ways that our
yeah,
senses kick in and layer upon each other in these kind of beautiful, unique recipes that are just our way of knowing, right?
mhm,
And that's that. Like when you went like this, for anyone who's listening on the podcast, like you actually kind of started at your solar plex and moved your hands upward towards your heart, right?
mm,
And so that what that says to me is that for you, maybe it's a gut feeling that
mhm,
needs to resonate um, with your heart, right? Like,
yeah,
so you have to have that resonance between those two places in order for you to know clearly this is the voice, right? This is
mhm,
what it is, or this is the guidance that I follow. Is
yeah.
that true?
Yeah, I want to go. It is. I wanted to go back to what you were talking about, the mind chatter. Sometimes we hear from different places or readings that we have to silence that, voice or quiet it down or ignore it or block it
Mhm.
out. And that's not the energy or the feeling that I approach. My approach is really recognizing that it is there. Like you
Mhm.
said, it's come um, because of patterns in the past, or perhaps it's experiences that I've had that it's trying to protect me from, that are no longer present. But I think that the difference is that I see it as not paying attention to it. So it's going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that it will ever go. I don't think it'll go away. I think that it's, I can recognize that it's there, and then I'm choosing to pay attention to something else.
Yeah.
So there's this ability, not always, but we're human. We're going to be fluctuating and riding the waves.
Yeah.
But like I was saying to you this morning, I'm having a lot of technology issues that's really been throwing me into this, tailspin, because I use it for my work. And I've been doing a lot of breathing to come back to my core, my soul, whatever label you want to put it, to the moment, to this moment. And when I do that, the chatter of the mind, I'm not paying attention to the chatter, right? So if I'm actively saying, I'm breathing in and I'm breathing out, I'm calming my body, or whatever mantra or whatever it is that you want to focus on, I think what's happening in my mind, in my body, is that my attention is going to focusing on the breath. So I'm not paying attention to that voice. So I don't think that the voice is going away. I think it's just I'm shifting my attention.
I
So
love that
I don't know. That
description.
was just a realization that I was having this morning on my walk. And I've learned from a lot of teachers, spiritual teachers, meditation teachers, and sometimes I've followed some practices without really quite understanding it. And later on down the road, something clicks and then you get it, or something says
Yeah.
something in a certain way. So that's kind of a more recent thing, is just like realizing, it's like, oh wait, it's quiet because I'm not paying attention to it as much.
That's not where your focus is, right? And I love that, because a phrase that comes up a lot with some resistance is focus on the positive, right? Like I hear so much resistance about that phrase, and about it being kind of labeled as spiritual bypassing or toxic positivity, right? And my understanding of that phrase, the way that I engage with it, and I know that this is my experience, right? And I've done a lot of spiritual work and inner work, and spent time in my own practices. So my understanding of that is one that I've developed over time. And it's very similar to what you're explaining, as in, it's not about ignoring that something else is there. It's about focusing in on one thing and allowing that to kind of like take center stage, right? That's, you're giving it that important place in your awareness, so that that can be the thing that you're actively and consciously engaging with. So, like, for instance, when you meditate, whether it's a walking meditation, a seated meditation, whatever kind of meditation it is, right? The concept of meditation is generally to be present. I think a lot of times we kind of get this, there can be sometimes an understanding that to meditate is to turn off your brain, or to have it be quiet. That is not, again, that's not my understanding of it, and not what I've had in my experience. It's really to be present with all that's going on, and at the same time to allow yourself to keep having that focus where you choose to have it, whether it's on focusing on a flame, focusing on your breath, focusing on the rhythm of your movement, right? And allowing all of that chatter. There's a construction zone happening outside of my window, right? So it's fairly quiet today, but a lot of times when I'm having, guests on the podcast, or I am having meetings with people, or I'm trying to do my own meditation, there for months, I swear there was a jackhammer going for months. It nearly drove me insane, because it was all the time. It felt like it was all the time anyway. It is a difficult thing to meditate when there's a jackhammer happening, yards away from your face. But that's part of the experience, right? To be able to keep coming back into that centered place, even amongst the chaos that's going on around you. And sometimes that chaos is actually in your own mind, right? Is that kind of
Yeah,
what you're getting?
totally.
Yeah.
Totally. It's I like what you're saying, that it's for a recent example for myself with the technology issues that I've been experiencing. It brings up some fear and anxiety, and then the mind chatter goes, and then all of these like problems that could happen. Like I time travel. A friend of mine says that, when I'm
Yeah.
not in the present
Future
moment,
projecting.
I'm traveling to the future of what could
Mhm.
possibly go wrong, or the past of what went wrong last time, or regrets or whatever. So if I'm time traveling, I'm not in the present moment. If I can catch myself, come back to the breath. I used to think it was kind of cheesy, when people would say, just take a breath, come back to the moment. But really, I understand it in a different way. So what's different in the way that I understand this is, if I'm when things are calm, when the jackhammer's not going on, when the computer's working fine, if I can just practice coming back to the moment, taking the breath, feeling calm, right, and trusting that everything is working out okay, then that's this practice. It's kind of like weightlifting that I'm doing, like in strengthening those muscles, so that when chaotic things happen, right, the jackhammer, the computer breaks, then in that moment of stress, I'm not flying off the handle and flying into the crazy zone with, the critic or the voices. And I have a little bit of memory of like, right, breath, and I come back to the breath, and I, center myself, do whatever it is, there's so many different ways to come back to center, to core. There is no one way, right? So I use methods from all different teachers that really resonate for me. One of them is nature. Actually, that's a really big one. But
Nature's a
I wanted
huge
to,
teacher.
if we're practicing when things are not chaotic, when they're fairly calm, then when things are chaotic, we can ride that wave, come back, so that we have some sense of sanity, so that we're not a crazy person yelling at the person who's trying to help you with your computer, right?
Right.
So, because I experienced that when I went to the store. This poor person, I can tell he's really struggled a lot, and he's yelling at the clerk, and she's trying to be helpful. And I think I was just like, I sat there because I couldn't leave, and I was just breathing, and just like focusing on my breath, because I can feel that energy. And this is the thing too, is like the more that I've tapped into that place of being, I can also sense it in other people, whether they're, whatever direction they're in. So also what I wanted to tag on to this is coming back to the present moment. I just lost my train of thought. Let me just
It's
grab
okay.
that.
We get it back.
Oh, I know what it is. The solution. So sometimes the solution oftentimes the solution will come when I'm calm, and when I'm in this centered place where I can access this flow of I don't know, good energy, solutions,
Full
ideas,
wisdom, like
right?
your
So,
wisdom coming through, right? Yeah.
right. So, for example, something happens, you don't know what the solution is. And if I use my brain and my mind and go to that mind chatter place, I'm like, okay, what do I need to do? I need to do this and this and this. I got to call this and do that. I get caught up in the doing and the worry. But before I do that, if I just stop and take a breath and come back and try to calm myself into that place as much as possible, sometimes the solution will come in a different way, and often it's easier.
Yeah.
And so I use this with all kinds of decisions that I need to make, because I've grown up trying to rationalize a lot of things. I have a background as in science, and I can analyze and rationalize and draw out all kinds of plans and do an analytical part of it. But really, more and more, what I've come to rely on is that intuitive part, and we can use both of those together. But if I'm not, here in the present moment, this moment, with my using the breath to bring me back, or going to nature to bring me back, then I'm making it harder for myself.
Absolutely. I'm kind of laughing to myself because this really out of an example or a metaphor is coming to mind that is not one I would have imagined you and I having a conversation about, but for some reason this is just a really strongly coming in, and it is a basketball scrimmage. And so what you were talking about with, I mean, it could be any sport really, but
Yeah.
like for some reason basketball is coming to mind. I played basketball in school, so maybe that's why. But um, when you practice, right, your spiritual practice that you're talking about, this practice of breath work, this practice of meditation, this practice of, it can be a creative practice, it can be whatever kind of practice,
Mhm.
right? But if it's helping you really kind of hone your skills of how you show up in these chaotic moments, right? But I think the reason why this basketball scrimmage was coming into mind is because you have a playbook, right? You and your coach and your team, you go over like different scenarios and say,
Mhm.
these are some situations that could happen, and here's how we're going to deal with it, right? So
Mhm.
in that situation, you're very consciously going into this knowing that the other team is going to not know your playbook and not be able to necessarily anticipate what you're doing. But they're also going to make some moves that you don't expect, right? So you are only able to do the part of practicing what you know and what is true for you, right? Like what your team knows. And you also, though, tend to, in a basketball practice, you will divide the team up and you'll have two opposing teams. One will be the defense to help you practice your
Mhm.
offense, right? And I'm going to try not to go too deep into this metaphor. But the reason this is coming up is because that's the role of your chatter brain in your meditation,
Mm.
right? They're
Mhm.
playing the competition. They're playing your competitor or your opposing team, because you're showing up and saying, okay, I'm going to practice this thing. And then you get the gift of your own mind showing up, your own thoughts showing up, the parts of your life being reflected in your environment being reflected to say, okay, I'm going to challenge you, right? I'm going to challenge you to practice this, because you're not, hopefully you're not meditating while you're driving down the road, right? Or while you're in a conversation with someone, but you can use the tools that you learned. You can help your body learn how to
Mhm.
drop into the breath, right? When those things happen. Um, and I think that's why it's so important to know that you're not, it's not, the goal is not to make these things go away, right? Because that's not going to happen in your life. They're not, it's
Mhm.
not going to go away. The noises, the chatter, the inner critic, like those things are not going to go away, but you can learn how to be in a conversation with them that is more peaceful. And you
Wow.
can also learn how to bring your focus to another area so that that kind of fades off into the background when you need it to, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I like that analogy.
A basketball scrimmage.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
funny
No,
analogy, but
it's a good example, and I also want to say, to anyone who's listening, it's like we don't have to analyze, like overanalyze why the inner critic is there, what we need to do. I've found that like I need some of that kind of analytical explanation, but
Mhm.
more and more as time goes on, and the more inner work that I do, I realize that it's simple. It's
Mhm.
just coming back to your core, to yourself, to your breath, whatever phrasing that you want to use, and tapping into this universal wisdom, this
Yeah.
knowledge that comes. I mean, I'm sure some of you have had those feelings, like when you've had a gut feeling, or a lump in your throat, or you just have this idea like, I've got to call my mom. Actually, I would love to see, those of you who are joining us live and are able to chat, like type in there, like, have you ever experienced this in your life, where you've had this sensation in your body, or an idea or a knowing that was not explainable.
Mm.
I
And then
think,
take an action on it, or just had the knowing.
yeah,
Those are,
yeah, I think that well, at least I'll speak for me, in my growing up, I was taught to ignore a lot of that. It's like, oh, it's all in your head. That's totally fine.
Mhm.
Just do it anyways. Or like, no, what are you talking about? And pushing me out into a place where I knew in my body, I didn't really feel comfortable. And I think starting to recognize that is really important. Like I took it was a self-defense course when I was in college, and I can't remember like who it was, but it was a really unique way of self-defense. And the teacher was talking about, it was all for women, and she was talking about how we have a sensation in a situation, and she had us reflect on that. And it was surprising to me. That was the first time that I ever thought about those sensations, like the goosebumps, or like
Mhm.
chills down your back when someone comes near, or when you hear a sound, or something, right? Some bodily sensation, right? We have lots of words for it, but we've discounted that those are signals for us to pay attention. So
Mhm.
I see those as soul wisdom, a
Yeah.
kind of soul wisdom language, right? That butterflies in the stomach, right? They're all sensations.
Yeah.
So, I guess one of the things is just for anyone who's new to this kind of language, just reflect on when you've sensed this, and whether you ignored it, or maybe you were encouraged to pay attention to these things.
Those are interesting questions too, and that we've had a couple of comments. So yes, all the
Yeah.
time. Yes, I call this feeling spirit, right? And Angela, my sister's on. She says,
Mhm.
"I was two. I'm Regina's sister, so we both grew up with that. But yeah,
Yeah.
like it is. There's lots of ways that you can. I keep playing with this necklace. I don't know what I'm doing, but um, there are lots of ways that you can label that or identify with that, right? Like feeling spirit or feeling tingles or having
Mhm.
this knowing, right? Like
Yeah.
um, there's that part of it, right? That's what I call your ways of knowing, right? And then
Mhm.
there's the ways of being, and that is how do you take action on that, and
Mhm.
do you take action on it? Because those two things often do go kind of hand in hand, right? So
Mhm.
when you get in tune with, and I think this is, you referred to this much earlier in our conversation, Melinda, is when you really get in sync with that, like I said, I call that soul wisdom, when you get in touch with that way that spirit speaks to you, that your soul speaks to you, that your body or nature or whatever way your ways of knowing are,
Mhm.
then you also get that confidence and clarity of, okay, this is in alignment, right? Because this isn't necessarily that mind chatter that we were talking about. This is my way of knowing, and I know that because it's something that I'm familiar with. It's something that oftentimes, when I start working with people, they're generally grown and are adults working as oftentimes entrepreneurs, soulpreneurs, creators who are owning and running their own business, right? Or in the process of that, or doing some, or really getting to know kind of their ways of knowing and being. And it's interesting because somehow a lot of times it becomes this really complicated, abstract concept to know what your soul purpose is, or know how your soul speaks to you, or know what your what those languages, how they sound. And then there's this realization that, oh, it's that thing. It's that thing that I've been doing since I was born.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
that thing that like people thought I was weird for, or it's
Mhm.
that thing that comes so easily to me, that happens all the time.
Mhm.
Yes, yeah, because you were born with that wisdom, with
Mhm.
that language, right? And you've spoken it your whole life. You just might not have always valued it, or you just might not have always recognized that this is what it is.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's I love that question that you asked. It's such a good question. Um,
Yeah.
go ahead. What were you going
Oh,
to
and
say?
I was gonna say, and when we recognize that and hone that ability to listen to it, it can give us so much. How do I say? Making decisions much easier.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I really, tap into that, talk to other people who are also using their soul wisdom to make decisions in their business or in their lives, moving forward. And I found that I've had to make some really important decisions recently, and it was neat to be able to really embrace the soul wisdom aspect of it, because I think that in my science upbringing in science world, the analytical part was really valued more strongly than anything else, right? So it felt like I was living these two lives, and in the last couple of years, really allowing that to meld together and let it play in the same place, and know that, yeah, I can analyze this situation to see if, does it seem sound from whatever perspective I know from the world, right? Whether it's business or financial or whatever. And along with that, like side by side, using that wisdom that's coming through me, that feeling, how sometimes it just doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Right. That is a sign. That's really valuable. And then exploring that. So I think kind of using it hand to hand is really a beautiful way to live life with more peace and ease, and know that you're going down this beautiful, beautiful path.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the difference between and the relationship between wisdom and knowledge, right? Knowledge is something that you gain through lived experience, or that you gain through kind of exploring the ways that other people have shared their ways of knowing and being. And wisdom is something that you have internally. It's something that it's that innate knowing, that gut feeling, those ways that you know things without having to have that external validation, right? And I love that you use the word the signs. And so these two things can work in collaboration with each other. However, a lot of our spheres of work haven't necessarily celebrated that. Right, like I think
Yeah.
science is a great example of that, where there are sciences that do a bit more. Like if you look at quantum physics, there's a lot more with that
Mhm.
kind of a lot more exploration in that kind of world, right? But if you look at something like biology, or some of the more like body based science, it's not as much a part of that
Mhm.
space. And so when you're working in those spaces, and for me it was business, right? Like I worked in
Mhm.
the business world. I also worked in the space of education, and that one was always a little baffling to me, because um, education is the goal of education is to help us learn about learning, right? Like to help us
Mhm.
learn, but it's not always about learning. I think that's the difference, right? So it's like, as a teacher, you go through this process of learning pedagogy, like how to teach, why to teach, what are you doing and why. And then you go into the classroom, and oftentimes it's like, okay, now you just deliver this information, and instead of really focusing on, okay, it's like, how do I take this information and divide it up and give it out in ways that I can see, okay, I need to differentiate for the students, instead of necessarily teaching the students how to learn that for themselves, providing some information and letting everyone engage with it in the way that is really aligned for them. I don't know if that I may have gone on a tangent there, but
Yeah, I mean, using your wisdom and your intuition and reading the audience. I think all of that is really beautiful. That's an art. Teaching is an art, and if you can tap into that, your ways of knowing, I think it's it flows much better.
mm-hmm. Yeah. And as adults, I think we get to choose that a little bit more than we do as children,
Mhm.
because for instance, I took a nature journaling class with you, and I one of the things that I really loved about it was how different the students were that were in the class. And you put out, this is what I'm doing, this is how I do it, right? And you don't necessarily, I mean, you do that sometimes consciously, but it shows in your in how you share things and the work that you share, and people are attracted to that. And this is, I think, so important with being a soulpreneur, being an entrepreneur in the space of well-being and creativity, and all of these spaces where you're doing this work from a soul guided way, right? And then the people who show up in your space have a resonance with that. They're speaking the same language in some way, or their languages are complementary or harmonious to yours, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, the work that I do, because I have a science background, I personally am always working towards coming from my head to my heart.
Mm-hmm.
You might hear this phrase a lot, but like it's visceral for me. It's like I recognize that when I'm nature journaling, when I'm observing nature, that I can go I'm just gonna say too far for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have a science background, I want to collect data, right? And so I want to painstakingly write all this stuff down, and I want to repeat it, and I want to collect it time and time again, every day, every week, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
So then if I allow that part of, I'm going to go right here, this like the chatter, that whatever that energy is, to rule my nature journaling, then that's what it's going to become. It's going to be something I produce instead of being present.
Mm-hmm.
So really what my personal work with nature journaling is really working on being present and doing the production, like producing, but really like being present. That is the biggest thing. Using the journal to record my nature wisdom that I get. Nature speaking to me all the time. And I record it in my journal so that it can remind me later. It can be a service to somebody else. It can start stimulating some more ideas and thoughts. So what I, wish to do is help guide people back to nature.
Yeah.
Everyone has this innate ability to communicate with nature. We did in eons ago, before the modern world. We knew all of the plants. We knew which trees we could make firewood, which ones would build houses, which plants will cure a stomach ache, which ones will help with an infection, which ones had the best flavor, all these kinds of things, and how to catch different animals, how to follow the seasons.
Yeah.
We, in the modern world, many of us have lost touch with that. And I know that coming back to that brings us a sense of peace. At least it has for me and a lot of people that I've worked with. And that's really my mission, is really to help facilitate that reconnection to nature, help people find their own personal connection by observing. Sometimes we need the mind to help slow us or the body down. So the nature journal, I find, has been a really great tool for many busy-minded, fast-moving people to have this book and say, okay, this is my nature assignment. So I'm going to go and sit and be with this piece of nature, do this work, and then go from the head to the heart and really be present. So that's kind of where I am being guided, to go.
I love it. Yeah. It's there's a concept that I talk about a lot. If you've listened to this before, listened to this show before, you've definitely heard me say it, but form and no form. It's a concept from Reiki, and it's having a structure to help support the organic growth and the organic movement or the flow, right? So when you can have that, whether it's a rhythm within a cycle, right? Or whether it is a certain way of being that helps support you in order to receive, right? So even if you think of, I know we've talked about meditation a lot, so I'm going to use that as an example, but you sit still, or you focus on something, or you have this kind of rhythmic movement that you're doing so that you can have that focus so that you can then receive, right? So there's a structure, a container to hold that space and allow that flow to come through. And I think that's what with nature journaling, you're going out into nature, you have this, the structure, you have your notebook, you have your materials that you're using. I mean, this is similar to my own intuitive art process, right? Where
Mhm.
you then sit with it, you observe, you allow, you listen, you receive, and then you express that in
Yeah.
physical form as well. So very beautiful. I wanted to read this comment that came in.
Mhm.
So Lachelle, hi Lachelle. She says, when we do acquire that extra level of awareness and deeper critical analysis, combining our ways of knowing, we can begin to see, though, how sciences like biology, for example, do reveal how our body systems and the state that we are in at any given moment allow us to connect into our other ways of
Mhm.
knowing. Absolutely. Yeah. And, I think that I kind of alluded to as I was beginning to say that it's changing, kind of like how we interact with science more collectively, because it absolutely is there, and I think that there's more of a wider acceptance of kind of combining those ways of knowing, which is, to me, that is a joyful thing. And exactly the work that you were talking about, Melinda, too, and what you do with nature journaling, and coming into that from that science background, and bringing in this sense of play and wonder and curiosity and spirituality, like those types of activities, those spaces that are being created and explored and engaged with, are helping us to do that in
Mhm.
ways that really do align with our ways of knowing and being. Yeah,
Yeah, totally.
amazing. You have a really cool experience coming up soon, and I'd love for you
Yes.
to talk about that experience and tell us a little bit about it. It's a retreat.
Sure. Yeah, it's the idea for this came because earlier this winter, I found myself looking at nature and seeing how the leaves were falling off the trees, that the weather was getting colder, days were getting shorter, animals were slowing down, everything was kind of resting. And I also felt this deep need to pull back from all of like overscheduling, and um, I had physical symptoms in my body also that I listened to as signs that, okay, this is what I need to change what I'm doing right now.
Mhm,
And I found this really desire, this like strong desire, craving almost, to just come back to the earth
mhm,
and to slow down and not be on social media and my computer so much. And that's still continuing. I'm starting to feel a little bit more energized, but what I recognized is when we go into we are nature. We are part of nature. We are nature. And
mhm,
so it makes sense to me from an analytical part. Oh, yeah, it makes sense that maybe we slow down if Mother Nature and the animals are slowing down. But in our work world, we don't allow that.
mhm,
As an entrepreneur, I can set my schedule. So I feel grateful that I can do that. And so coming a long way around, what came to mind is like, wow, I want to be able to do this with other people, because I know there's others who might be. I've heard people questioning. It's like, gosh, I just really feel sleepy. I want to rest more. And
mhm,
we're not allowing that. So I wanted to create a space where we can come together online. I have lots of people from around the world that come to do nature journaling with me, but I wanted to create a space where we can go into nature. I do some guided activities to help slow us down to nature's pace, give us the permission to rest, and then I want to share with you some activities that helps me get from my head to my heart, to open my heart to be in nature. That is really a source of more energy. Like nature is a wellspring of energy. It's all out there for us, but we often just don't know how to tap into it. So that's the experience that I'm offering. It's a 4-hour retreat online on February 5th,
beautiful.
and anyone's welcome to join. We're going to be doing some nature journaling, but if that's new to you, it's okay. You can come and we're going to do it all together. There's a few things ahead of time that will help you connect to your nature. So the idea behind this is not, yeah, I know we're on technology and I'm talking about connecting to nature, but like Regina was saying, these are those foundations and practices that we'll do together, so that when we're not on Zoom, you'll have those with you that you can nurture in your own life and reconnect and develop that relationship with nature. So you'll find more about that. I think we're going to post the link later. So
Yeah.
welcome to join. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. And when you were talking about that, so it's an online retreat and, but it is in touch with being in touch with nature and learning those practices. A quick example of when I was taking your nature journaling class, that came up in my mind was, I had been doing kind of several weeks of really being present with this, with nature. And, oh, great. Kim says, Lachelle says, it looks like an amazing experience. And Kim says, I'm looking forward to Melinda's retreat. Awesome.
Great.
Yeah. So
Yay.
it is, I know it's going to be, so amazing and so nourishing. And so anyway, the thought that was coming up was I was actually driving on a highway and I was the driver. And I said to my partner, as we were driving through, and we'd been on this highway for a while, and it was kind of like gray and just not a whole lot going on. It was kind of a gray day. But I noticed these kind of tall purple flowers on the side of the road. And I actually said out loud, I was like, I'm curious if those are thistles. And she is much more into gardening, and she loves to garden, and she's more, I guess, like has a deeper vocabulary with nature than I do. And she just kind of looked at me and was like, who are you? What are you talking about? And I was like, I don't know. I just, sometimes I think these things in my head, but I don't always have the courage to say them. And it's not even the courage, but just like, I don't always think to say them out loud. Sometimes I just, have the curiosity and I just let it go. But because I had been in that practice of being curious about nature and actually writing it in my journal and drawing about it and asking questions, and it inspired me to actually say it out loud. And then we had this conversation about those flowers. And I mean, I was whipping by them on the highway at whatever speed I was going. So I don't know if they were, but yeah, it inspired that curiosity and that connection and that conversation. So I wanted to give that as an example, because even though, yes, we were online together when we were having these experiences, when I went out into the world, it did inspire, it emanated and radiated out into my life in other ways. So.
Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that experience.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah. So Melinda, we're going to put the link in, I'm going to put it on all the platforms that we have live right now. So we're live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. So I'll go in and update the link to actually go ahead and register for that experience, as well as how to connect with you. And do you want to give a quick blurb about how people can connect with you on a regular basis in addition to this event?
Yes. In addition to the event, I have different nature journaling opportunities to come up. Once a month, there's a free nature journal club that I host online, so anyone can join. It's the third Sunday of the month. There's other events that happen throughout the month, but the best place to go is my website, so sparkinnature.com. Go to the events tab, and I'll have the links to all the events that are coming up. But that would be the next one. Also, if you're in the Santa Cruz area, I partner with the Santa Cruz Museum of Natural History, and we offer a monthly nature journaling in person. So that's also a fun event that you can check out as well. And then I have some on-demand classes that you can take a look at on the site. Then I'll set up a link for that as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here. This has been a wonderful exploration. Everything from back to basketball practice to to
Yeah.
spiritual practice to all sorts of things. So always a joy talking with you. Thank you to everyone who was here live. If you are watching the vodcast on any of the live platforms, make sure to like, subscribe, follow, whatever the correct terminology for that platform is, so you get notifications when we go live again. And I'll actually be here again tomorrow. This is a busy week for the Soul Wisdom Exchange. So I'll be here tomorrow with Annette Maria, and we're going to be talking about somatic healing and somatic movement and how that can be a really beautiful practice. So thank you so much to everyone who was here live and watching later or listening later. And thank you, Melinda, for being
Yeah.
here. Have
Thank
a great
you.
day.
All right. Bye.
Bye.